Hi, Yoshi. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. I got Yoshi with me. Let me all know if you have any questions. Huh? Hi, Yoshi. Oh, will there be a primary debate with Rosa? I would love to have a primary debate with Rosa. Right now she probably does not take our campaign seriously, or she doesn't want to draw too much attention to it, because one of the first things that we're going to, one of the biggest hurdles that we will face, or first big hurdle that we're going to face, is having ballot access. There are two ways of getting onto the ballot in Connecticut. One is at the May 11th Congressional Convention, where you have to earn 15% of Democratic Town Committee delegates to put you on the ballot. The second way is collecting petition signatures, but that process doesn't open until April 28th. We are trying to get we're trying to identify voters beforehand who we can send canvassers to get that official signature when the petition period opens. But the likelihood is that unless we make it onto the ballot, she will not be interested in debating us. I don't believe she's actually debated anyone since she was elected. She rarely debates her Republican opponent. And in the state of Connecticut, there has never been a primary, so she's never had to debate anyone before. Now, if we're able to make it onto the ballot and we start presenting, if she believes that, we are a legitimate threat to her, then her and her team might be more inclined to debate us to try and, put me in my place. But we have a lot of information about her and some of her most recent failures. So it would be great to debate her, because I think if, there's nothing I know just from experience with talking to voters, a lot of people have a conception of Rosa DeLauro and she's been very good at building her brand up. But when you actually start telling people about her record and some of the things that she has supported, some of the things that she doesn't support, the fact that she takes corporate funding, that she will not abolish ICE, that she voted in favor of the Charlie Kirk resolution, that she's not supportive of universal health care. Once people start learning these things, they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea that this was going on, that she supports these things or doesn't support these things. And so I think for her team, they are going to be nervous about having that challenged. The other thing is I have gone to some places where she has been to try and talk to her, and I've heard from other people who have had conversations with her that she's not really able to form full sentences anymore. And so we do wonder if her team is going to try and keep her as far away from us as possible, because we're able to explain, concepts. We're able to talk more about things than just, the main talking points that the establishment Democrats usually feed to the incumbents. And so we're skeptical, but if there's enough pressure, or I think if her ego is challenged, her and her team might be more willing to set up a debate. But yes, we would love to have a debate with her, because that would be fantastic. Has anyone been concerned about her being AIPAC endorsed? So that's another, speaking to the idea of this perception of her, is a lot of people don't know that she takes AIPAC money. I did confront her, confront is a gracious term. I did accost her on July 25th, Christmas in July of 2025, where I did challenge her about her support for the genocide in Gaza, for giving another $500 million to the Israeli government to continue perpetuating that genocide. And so I've been endorsed by Track AIPAC. We refuse to take AIPAC money. We refuse to take any Israeli lobbyist money. And we refuse to take corporate money. And so a lot of people don't know that Rosa DeLauro accepts corporate money, because she has painted herself as this, progressive. And to me, progressives, they don't take money from corporations. And I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And in Attack of the Clones, in episode 2, Obi-Wan Kenobi says to Anakin that he has observed that politicians usually please the ones that fund their campaign. And so for myself, and I think a lot of voters, they are starting to question, if you're taking all this corporate money, are you actually here to represent our interests, or are you going to represent the interests of the corporations? And so one thing that our campaign has been trying to do is to inform the public about some of her corporate financing. So AIPAC is a big one. And so when when I confronted her and said, why can't you call this a genocide? I actually said to her, how do you sleep with yourself not calling this a genocide? And she immediately answers very well, which I thought was just a little atrocious of an answer. But can she not call this a genocide because she truly believes that this is not? Or can she not call it a genocide because AIPAC gives her money? Another, prominent example is abolishing ICE. We are very supportive of abolishing ICE. Our campaign has been calling for abolishing ICE since day one, and she refuses to abolish ICE. And sometime in February, she actually had a meeting with 20 clergy people in the district where they asked her, can you abolish ICE? Would you commit to that? And they were saying that, it's a moral imperative that we abolish ICE. And she wound up saying to the clergy people that she was, upset that they were questioning her morality, which upset a lot of people. But she accepts money from AT&T, L3 Harris, and General Dynamics, among many other corporate interests. But the reason why I mentioned those three is that all three of them have contracts with ICE. So they profit off of ICE and their operations. So when Rosa DeLauro says that she doesn't want to abolish ICE, well, if you take money from corporations that profit off of ICE, are you not abolishing ICE because that is what you think is best for the constituents of Connecticut and for our country? Or is that what your corporate sponsors demand of you in return for getting that money? Look at the situation in Iran. She did vote for the War's Power resolution a couple weeks ago. But if you look at that resolution, it doesn't say that we don't support war. It just says that we don't support war unless we give the president permission for that war. I am vehemently opposed to any sort of military operation in Iran or in the Middle East or imperialism in general, because at the end of the day, I don't think it is, first of all, right of America to influence sovereign nations and the decisions that they are making. I would not want France or Russia or China or Brazil or any country in this world to have an influence on our sovereignty. And so I don't think it's right for Americans to put their influence on other sovereign nations. But also, I just don't think that we should be sending our brave men and women overseas to die for these wars that are not for our freedom. They are typically for oil or other natural resource extraction. And so the reason why I'm mentioning all of this is Rosa DeLauro also takes campaign contributions from Lockheed Martin, from Honeywell International, from Raytheon, from Boeing, General Dynamics, L3 Harris, and all of those CEOs were over at the White House a week or two ago meeting with Trump talking about ramping up war manufacturing. And so if these corporations are going to start profiting off of another never-ending war in Iran, and she accepts money from these corporations, sure, she voted for the War Powers Resolution, but let's go back to December when she voted in favor of the $960 billion imperial war budget. If you don't support going to war and if you don't support imperialism, why does she keep voting in favor of these budgets that allow for such a large imperial war budget and, sending our military and our technology and our money overseas when people here in our own district are suffering? Has anyone, people should also be worried, and she can't tell the difference between. So yes, that is a very good point. But from what I understand, she can't always tell the difference between a lot of things. And I hesitate to make anything too much of an age issue, because just because you are old doesn't necessarily mean that you are completely out of it. But it does increase the likelihood that you are out of it. And so, Biden was encouraged to take cognitive tests. Trump was encouraged to take cognitive tests. It's like, if you are in such a position of power, and so she is the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, and that is one of the most powerful committees in the Congress. But if you don't have the cognition to fully understand what is going on, that I think is dangerous to have that amount of power. People are complaining that Trump might be losing it. They complain that Biden might be losing it. If she can't tell the difference between the Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Customs and Border Patrol, yes, that is something that should concern a lot of people, because it's like, what else are you mixing up? And, if you have, and she's been there since the beginning of ICE, over the years, she has continued to fund it and support it. And again, to this day, she refuses to abolish ICE. And so, thank you for bringing that to my attention, because there's a lot of information going on. There's a lot of dumpster fires to be putting out. And sometimes information for us even falls through the cracks. And this is a great data point to be able to have. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I saw another person join. Hello, welcome. We're just talking about corporate funding and PAC funding, especially with AAPAC. And for this campaign, we're not accepting corporate donations. We're relying on grassroots support, working class people who are able to chip in a couple of dollars, and that helps pay for literature. That will we need a campaign office, so that would help pay for rent. We'll need a campaign manager. That'll help pay for certain positions that just do require some amount of funding. But going back to the corporate and money aspect of campaigns, is at the end of the day, I think we really need something. So in Connecticut, there's the Citizens Election Program, which requires you to get a certain amount of donations from people within the area that you're going to represent. And if you meet both the dollar threshold and the number of constituent threshold, you are given a grant to then use to run your campaign. And so at the end of the day, I think that is a model that should be adopted on the federal level. And we really need to be moving towards publicly funded elections, because it's like, even say we get 10,000 donors to give us $100, and that funds the campaign. This campaign would still technically be more beholden to those 10,000 donors, which is better than being beholden to 20 to 30 corporations. But at the end of the day, the person who represents a district is supposed to be representing around, each district has around 750,000, should be representing around 750,000 people, not just the people that have given them money. Again, having 10,000 people giving smaller donations is better than having 100 corporations give large donations. But still, at the end of the day, I think we need that public financing. Have I heard? Yes. Oh, yeah. I have definitely heard of Josh Elliott's campaign for governor, and I 100% support Josh Elliott. I think he is a firebrand. I've met him several occasions. He's a really good guy. If you've looked at his legislative track record, he's done a lot of work trying to reform the prison system. He is a big proponent of ranked choice voting, and he has a spine. And I think these days it's good to have politicians that have spines. Our current governor, Ned Lamont, I don't think he has a spine, which is weird because he's a centimillionaire, so we know he can afford a spine, and so I would highly encourage people to check out Josh Elliott's campaign. I definitely believe that he is suited for this moment to actually lead us, to keep us safe from ICE, and Lamont is now trying to get $5 donations to claim that he is also a grassroots candidate. And it's just, how out of touch can that man possibly be? And so I am rooting for Josh, and I really hope that he's able to get the last time I checked, I think he was up at like $170,000. I think he needs to raise $350,000 to be able to get like an $8 million grant. And so I'm really rooting for him and hoping that he's able to pull in some of that money before his convention, which I believe is May 16th. Hello, Emma. Hello, Blackjack. Thanks for joining. We're just talking a lot about campaign financing, PAC money. Let me know if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I'll start probably rambling on something, usually things that have happened over the past couple of days, such as the No Kings rallies. I'm not sure if any of you were able to get to any of them. I myself was in Hartford in the morning. I gave a speech at the Middletown No Kings rally, and then I headed down to New Haven to table and collect unofficial signature petitions so that we can hopefully start identifying voters who would be willing to sign the official petition once that opens on April 28th. But we are going to try and go to convention and earn the delegates. We have plans to go around the state to visit DTCs to talk about our campaign, our message, and why we feel like this campaign is right for the moment, and how Rosa DeLauro has been an interesting needle to thread, because a lot of people actually do wind up liking Rosa, but I have met several people who have said that even though that they do like and appreciate things that she has done, that it is time for a change, that she is, too old, and that we do need younger blood in there. And so we're always looking for support, for volunteers, spreading the message, commenting, liking, sharing on social media. All of these things really do help push the campaign forward. Yeah, there's two of you in the room. Let me know if you have any questions for me or for Yoshi. Hello. Oh, I think that's David. So right now, everyone who's in the room, I think I know personally. Yoshi? Huh? So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. This is Yoshi. He was not able to make it out this weekend with us on the campaign trail. Still a little cold. And that was, so yesterday when I was talking to a couple of people, the cold weather came up a lot. The fact that on Friday it was, 50 and beautiful. Today it was 50, still a little chilly. But of course yesterday it was 30 degrees. And a couple people were saying that if we were conspiracy theorists, we could just say that MAGA was controlling the weather to try and depress turnout for the No Kings rallies. But yeah, when it's that cold, I hesitate to bring Yoshi out because I don't want his little pawsies to get cold. So I was very pleased to see, I don't know if there was as much in Hartford, but in New Haven, there was definitely, I think I saw at least 4 or 5 different Palestinian flags, a couple bigger ones. There were lots of kufayas. And then during the march portion of it, there were a couple of people that started saying free Palestine, free Palestine. And so I had my bullhorn, and I was very happy to hear that. And so I also started pushing the free Palestine chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And so I was very happy to see that there was more Palestinian representation. Up in Hartford, though, I do want to mention that there were 2 rallies that were being held in New Haven, or in Hartford. On the north side, there was the Indivisible rally, And on the south side, there was the 50-51 rally. And so the backstory of that is originally it was supposed to be one combined rally, but before 50-51 could even have any input, Indivisible had already gone ahead and booked Senator Blumenthal. Now, Senator Blumenthal is AIPAC funded. He is a Zionist, and he has not called what is happening in Palestine a genocide, and has continuously been supporting the Israeli government in what they have been doing in Gaza and the West Bank. And because of that, 50-51 said that you either need to remove him from the program or we were having a separate event because we refused to give a platform to this man who has been supporting a genocide, who has been taking money from AIPAC, and who has been spreading Zionist propaganda. And so I was very proud of Connecticut 50-51 for standing to their values, sticking true to what they believe in, and not platforming someone who receives AIPAC money and who has been silent on calling out what is happening in Palestine, and that is a genocide. Or should I be saying G-side? I know sometimes the algorithms will pick up on certain words and will sometimes cut the feed. So people have been careful of that, but I just said the word and nothing happened yet. Let's not jinx myself. But yeah, so because the one of the things that's a bit problematic or infuriating is the so I think Alyssa Slotkin just said something about how, you know, the Democratic Party needs to be more masculine. I'm like, okay, you're starting to sound like the toxic masculinity that the MAGAs are really pushing for. And she even said something like, you know, the Democratic Party, if they did an autopsy, would see X, Y, and Z. And she's like, well, that's funny, Alyssa, because we did do an autopsy, and the party leaders buried it because that autopsy showed that had Kamala Harris just come out and said that what is happening in Gaza is a genocide, and had she come out and taken an actual stance against the atrocities that Israel has been committing there, that she could have won the election. But no, she just said that, you know, she wouldn't do anything different than Biden. She just basically took that position of, well, Trump's so bad that, you know, the left would never sit out of this election and allow Trump to win. And then I know a lot of people have gotten mad at people who refuse to vote for Kamala Harris because they're like I've seen people say, like, I'll never forgive the Gaza people for not supporting Kamala Harris. And it's just like, what do you expect people to do? Support genocide? So I just love when all of these, because I think originally Ezra Levine and the Indivisible movement originated as a way to kind of gloss over what was happening in Palestine and keep the focus away from Palestine. And so I'm very happy that there was a lot of Palestinian representation, because at the heart of all of this, what's happening with ICE, what's happening around, what's happening in the Middle East with Iran and Syria and Lebanon, what's happening with our own people not having the money for healthcare and education and housing, a lot of that can be traced back to what is happening in Palestine. We are sending, we send $4 billion a year on average. In the past several years, we've been sending, I think another 20 or 40 or even like $60 billion to perpetuate this genocide. That's money that's not being used here in our district. That's money that's not being used so that people can get health care, so that children can go to schools that aren't falling apart, so that people can get housing and aren't priced out of the housing market. What's going on in Iran right now is the Zionist plan of creating a greater Israel. And so in order for us to defeat fascism, in order for us to not have a king, we need to be having policies that are addressing working class issues and affordability issues and making sure that people have what they need to survive, instead of sending all of this massive amount of money to an apartheid state that is committing genocide, that is destabilizing the region, and that is trying to ethnically cleanse that region based off of a very loose and relatively modern interpretation of the Bible that was just started in, I can never remember his full name. I remember his last name is Darby, John Nathan Darby. Back in 1831, he started the whole movement of the rapture and the fact that the Jewish people need to return to Israel and cleanse the land of the Arabs so that they could build a temple that Jesus would come down to. And that happened in 1831. Then in 1881, we started seeing the first proto-Zionist movements. And then in 1896, I think is when Theodor Herzl proposed, what became modern Zionism. And so a lot of what is going on in our nation is a direct result of hey Raymond, is a direct result of 100 plus years of this Zionist philosophy, and a lot of it is Christian Zionism, and this idea that if we return all of the Jews to Israel and cleanse the region of Muslims, that they will be able to bring forth the apocalypse, have the rapture, and then be brought up to heaven to be with God forevermore. Jesus comes down and then gives the Jews one last opportunity to accept them as their Lord and Savior, or to accept him as their Lord and Savior. And if they don't, he slaughters all of them. And so, if anyone who's just joining, we're talking about the No Kings rallies and if there's any Palestinian representation. And so I was just informing the audience that yes, there was Palestinian representation. I don't know if I saw much in Middletown, but in Hartford and New Haven, but especially New Haven, there was a lot of presence of Palestinian flags. And again, if we're going to ever resolve a lot of these issues, we need to start at the core of a lot of it, and a lot of it does originate in what is happening in Palestine. Yes. So there is he's not a poet. Ta-Nehisi Coates said that if you can't stand up against G-side, how can we have any faith that you can stand up for democracy? And so, yes, we should not be accepting G-side, but one of the unfortunate realities is that, America does have a beautiful history, but it also has a dark history. And so this nation was originally founded by G-siding the native populations. And so what is happening in Palestine is just a reflection of our own history in America, where there was desirable land, and instead of sharing it like the natives intended, the colonists just came in and killed them all. And so until we resolve that in our own history, that and the enslavement of Black people and the historic disenfranchisement of women in this country. So three big things that this country's history, that has put a stain on this country's history. If we don't ever address those, then I don't think we're ever going to be able to move forward in a prosperous way. And so we need to come to terms with a lot of these things, because what is happening in Palestine does have a lot of, history based on our own history of what happened to the natives. And even to this day, the native population is typically under attack. Anytime that there's a, source of natural gas or oil, a lot of people abandon the treaties of native sovereignty and will build pipelines and will build whatever they need to get to those resources, despite the treaties that were signed with those sovereign tribes over generations ago. And so Ruth Bader Ginsburg used to be a huge inspiration for me. And then when she died, I read more about her history, and apparently even she didn't have the best track record with the natives of this country. And so it just does go to show that the native population has always been a target of our country and of our government. And so it really should not surprise us that if we were willing to do that historically to people on these lands, and we still haven't resolved that, and we still treat them very poorly, it makes sense that we would do that to nations across the sea. And so Palestine is the most egregious and forefront presenting example of our failed imperial policies and our acceptance of G-side, but and it is it's a direct correlation. We pay taxes; those taxes are used to fund Israel's military. That military is used to commit a G-side. But there are other G-sides that are going around that we have indirect influence over. So, the situation in the Sudan, the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar. There are a lot of people that are facing G-side across the world, and a lot of it can be traced back to our imperialist policies. Anytime a nation discovers natural resources, or anytime a nation goes to nationalize those resources, usually there's a coup that can be traced back to CIA activities, or there's some sort of military intervention, and our government tends to try and manufacture consent. Trump tried to do that with Venezuela when they were saying that they're going after the cocaine dealers in Venezuela, which is hilarious because I think it was the president of Honduras or someone in Honduras that was actually trafficking cocaine. Trump gave them a pardon, but Maduro, who there was no evidence was doing anything with cocaine, we needed to go in to protect the American population of cocaine. Come to find out, there's no evidence of cocaine. There's evidence of a lot of oil. And so, we people that have lived through the Iraq War era and, Colin Powell giving the fake evidence of weapons of mass destruction, we now know this game, the younger generations now know this game book and know not to fall for that. But, so what's happening in Venezuela, imperialism, what's happening in Cuba, for those of you that don't know. And so that's another G-side in the making, because right now we have blockaded Cuba from receiving any oil. I believe Mexico tried to send shipments of oil over, and we prevented the Mexican fleet from getting to Cuba. I believe that they are starting to see a lot of blackouts across the country. A lot of, I think, medicines are spoiling because they don't have refrigeration. I believe public transit's been down. They haven't been able to do any sort of waste management because there's no oil for the cars and everything. It is definitely not being talked about enough. But this is just, again, another example of American imperialism. And so MLK is another one of my big inspirations. And, people know the I have a dream speech. They know the arc of the arc of history bends towards justice. They know the what is it? The other one is the injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But what people always tend to leave out on MLK Day is the fact that MLK was anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-military, anti-materialism. And so what is happening in Cuba is just another example of the capitalist and imperialist interests at work. And so Cuba does have a communist government. Cuba also has, I believe, some of the lowest poverty rates. They have the highest amount of doctors per capita. And so the capitalist interests in this world tend to focus on destroying either socialist or communist governments, because if there was ever a form of economic governance that was shown to be successful that isn't capitalism, it would be a threat to capital interests. And And so that is one of the reasons why Cuba has always been blockaded is because the American and the American capitalist system doesn't want the American people to see that there is another way that their needs could all be met and addressed. And what is happening in Cuba is atrocious. And I believe a group of people were able to break the blockade and bring them some resources, but it's not going to be enough. And so the people of Cuba will, in the coming weeks, start facing real possibilities of dehydration and starvation, and they are trying. I mean, they're flat out said that they are trying to destroy the revolutionary government of Cuba to install someone that is more friendly to American interests, and so then this ties back into Iran. So right now, the Trump administration does seem to want to have another regime change war, even though Trump advertised and ran on the idea that he would be the pro-peace president. Now, in the early 1950s, the Iranians had a very progressive government. They had a very progressive and popular president. And that president wanted to nationalize their oil, and that pissed off British Petroleum, BP. So MI5 and the CIA got together and planned and overthrew the popular government of Iran and installed the Shah. And the Shah was a brutal dictator, and eventually the Shah pushed things so far that there was the Islamic Revolution in the 1970s, and that's when the Ayatollahs started to arise. And so we installed the Shah to serve our interests. The Shah was overthrown by the people, and then the Ayatollahs were installed, and they didn't serve our interests. And we've been trying to, destabilize them ever since. And so anytime America tries to install these people that are going to be friendly to our interests, they wind up in the end not being friendly to our interests anyway. Well, in the beginning they usually are, but then they usually are not at some point. And so it is just history repeating itself over and over and over again. And this is one of the reasons why I consider myself an anti-capitalist, is because capitalism is a system that survives off of the idea of continuous profit in a finite system of resources. And so in order to continuously have that profit revenue, you have to continuously open up new and new markets until they are saturated. And in order to continuously find new markets, you have to find new avenues of natural resources. And if the sovereign nations don't want to give up those resources for a profitable margin, then imperialist policies usually take over, and we send in our military and our CIA to destabilize those regions so that we can install people that will usually are right-wing dictatorial governments that will be more friendly to our capitalist interests. And then there are many repercussions of those policies. And so one of the reasons why we have a lot of migrant influx into the country, I'm a big proponent of immigration. I believe that people should be welcomed here. Immigrants built this nation. Immigrants sustain this nation. A lot of times, to me, immigration is a moral issue. But if you need to look at the monetary aspect of it, the Cato Institute did a study that they released several weeks ago that looked at the expenditures of the government versus intake of the government from different populations of immigrants. And immigrants give a net benefit to government coffers than they receive in benefits. And so our government actually profits off of having immigrants. But, then you have people saying, we have, there's too many coming in, there's too much. But these migrant surges are typically a result of our imperialist policies. Because when you install these right-wing governments, they start going after their own citizens. They start going after, working class people, more left-leaning political philosophy. And this creates unsafe conditions. It also creates, a lot of economic instability, a lot of economic inequality. And so when this happens, this is another historical pattern where imperialist policies cause an influx of people who have been negatively impacted by that imperialism to return to the imperial core where the resources were taken. And so when you destabilize all of these regions in the global south, there's these pouring of refugees into other countries, and it's a ripple effect. This has been going on for generations, but one of the most prominent is what happened after Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement. And so once that agreement was made, the Mexican government started allowing our agricultural products into their markets. And those agricultural products in America, because we use pesticides, because we use GMOs, because we are able to produce things for cheap because the quality is so low, those started flooding the Mexican markets. Then the people started buying those cheaper products, and that put a lot of Mexican farmers out of business. Well, their skills were in farming, and they had nowhere to go because their businesses were put under. So then they fled to the United States so that they could work on the farms, earning a lot less than they did in Mexico. And then people complained about Mexican migration and Mexican immigration. That was a direct result of our own shitty policies forcing these conditions onto people, and the only escape that they could find was coming back to the imperial core. Oh, yes, I have a lot of thoughts on the CIA and mass surveillance. There's actually, right now, tomorrow, so I'm running in Connecticut 3rd Congressional District against Rosa DeLauro, but next door is the 4th Congressional District that is led by Jim Himes. Jim Himes has been going around trying to convince his Democratic colleagues to vote in favor of another extension of the FISA program, but this time it doesn't have any sort of built-in protections against AI and AI collecting our data. And so we need to put an immediate stop to the use of AI, especially when it comes to data mining and mass surveillance. There's a lot of talk about the program or an industry called Flock that is installing a bunch of cameras on roads under the guise of protecting roadways and trying to minimize people who have died on the roads, which are noble causes. But a lot of times we use real problems to create fake solutions for an ulterior motive. And so we need to put an end to mass surveillance, because all they're doing is collecting our data, everything that they can find out about us. And so, they're collecting our social security numbers, our voter rolls, our health records, our school records, our credit card information. And at this point, anytime we have a fart, they'll know about it, so that they can compile all this data using these AI data centers, so that they can do, I believe, 2 things at least. There might be more, but 1, advertising. They want to know exactly what we're going to buy so that they can target the ads, so that they can try and sell us on something that we don't need to further deprive us of our hard-earned money for filling holes in our lives that should be filled by human connection, but that can't be filled by human connection because the system has deprived us of our time and our energy to be able to have the time and energy for the human connection. And so we fill that void with material possessions that ultimately don't make us happy. That's the first thing they want our data for. The second thing that they want our data for is another mechanism of control. And so I was on another interview just before this, and we were talking about that. And so, I have to take a couple medicines for my health. And so if they have all this information about, what I do, where I go, what I buy, what medicines I need, and how I vote, they can start, messing with things behind the scenes. And, instead of, when I go to my doctor to refill a prescription, well, they'll know I need that prescription, and they'll know that I vote a certain way, and they'll know. They can easily start controlling people based off of what their needs are, because they will have the information to target people. Oh, and then I guess the third thing is, so there's this, I think it's a great movie. It's called Minority Report. It's got Tom Cruise. I think it was early 2000s. And they have what was called a pre-crime division, where these precogs could see the future and prevent crime because they could see that a person was going to commit a certain crime. And that's what part of this mass surveillance program is for, is you can observe people's movement, you can observe what they bought, where they go, what they eat, what they comment on Facebook, Instagram, what their political philosophy is, and make a determination as to how likely that person may be to commit a crime, but in this sense, the crime is going to most likely be speaking out against the government and what they are doing. And so we need to have a strict policies guiding how AI is developed, how it is used, how it is implemented, and just not, even on the even though there's the mass surveillance side of it, there's also the environmental side of it. The UN just released a report recently saying that we are under the first stages of water bankruptcy, and a lot of that can be attributed to the rise in the use of AI. Hey, Matt, I think it's Matt. Hey, Matt. I believe that's your name. I remember we had this conversation when we interviewed about getting people's names right. So I hope that is the correct name. We were just talking about AI surveillance, and so the water aspect, I forget the exact amount, but like every time you use AI, Mike, okay, Mike, knew it was an M. Sorry about that, dude. And thank you for joining my Fireside Chat. I really appreciate it. For any of you that are here, Breaking the Meta is a podcast. Mike is doing a lot of great work trying to help progressive candidates get their name out there. One of the biggest issues that a lot of candidates like us are facing. So, well, first of all, one question that I get on the campaign trail is, if you make it into office, you are one person. How does one person change anything? I'm like, that's a great point. One person can gum up the machine, gum up the gears in the machine to slow down bad policy, but this year is a little different because it's not just a couple of people that are running on the left as progressives and working class FDR Democrats. I'm a part of two groups. One is called Reasoned Reality. One is called Courage for Democracy through Citizens Impeachment. The Reasoned Reality, we have about 80 congressional candidates from across the country. And for the Courage candidates through Courage for Democracy, we have about 127 candidates. And so this is a real opportunity this year to create some real change, because if there's 120 of us, there's a lot of overlap between the two. So maybe there's 130, 140 when you combine us all. Even if half of us get in, even if a quarter of us get in, if 25 of us get in, a lot of these campaigns, they are just normal, everyday people who decided that, fuck this, we will put our hat into the ring and try and make some change. If 25, 30 of us get into office and get into this Congress, we now have a blueprint on how to get people in. We can share that information, and in the next 2 years, we can build a serious power block to challenge even more of these establishment Democrats. But in that meantime, we can try and get these establishment Democrats to now work with us, because if we have a block of power in the Congress and we can scare some of these establishment Democrats into realizing that if they don't do more for the working class people, if they do not support some of these popular programs, especially Medicare for All, we now have 25 people in Congress that will help the next round of Courage candidates and Reasoned Reality candidates getting into office to put even more pressure. But we can do it this year, but we need people's help. And so people like Mike have been joining this fight and interviewing candidates and helping them have a platform and getting the message out there. So thank you, Mike, for that hard work, and thank you for joining me today. It means a lot to me that you're taking time out, because I know the amount of work that you have been doing to get our names out there. So joining today really means a lot to me. Have you tried getting endorsement from a third party? So one of the most prominent third parties in the state of Connecticut is the Working Family Party. I am working through the endorsement. My campaign, it doesn't want me spending too much time on it, because at the end of the day, a lot of these parties and organizations, they say that they want, progressive candidates, they want the, real change and this and that. And a lot of us have been turned down by Working Families Party, by the Justice Democrats, different organizations. And it's been frustrating because they say one thing and then they're their actions don't always meet their words, and that they'd be great establishment Democrats, because that's a lot of times what happens with the establishment. They say some of these great things, but then they never follow through. Then I was also having a conversation yesterday with even just a voter, one voter who, I don't remember the exact relationship that they have to Rosa DeLauro, but they were like, I love everything you have to say. I would love to see you be the congressperson. But they wouldn't even sign, so the petition ballot process isn't even open yet. We're collecting unofficial signatures so that we can identify voters to hopefully target later for the actual official ballot. But this person would not put his name on an unofficial petition because he was too nervous that if it caught wind that he supported me and not Rosa, that he could lose his job. There are plenty of people in the government that would love to support me, but they're worried that if they support me, Rosa will no longer, fund projects that, they've gotten funding for, or that she will ignore their town. And I'm like, that is just atrocious. So a lot of times these people, they don't want, and it's almost been like the chicken and the egg cycle, where people want to see that you can, that they want to support winners. They want to see a winner, and they want to see someone succeed. And just like, and one of the biggest things that's been very frustrating in a lot of these places is that they'll say, we want money out of politics, but we want to see that you're able to raise $25,000-$50,000. There are some organizations that won't even consider looking at you unless you have $100,000, while simultaneously saying that they want money out of the system, but then still demand a monetary threshold to give you any sort of platform. And so it's frustrating because it's like, well, if this, third party or this organization did endorse me and did give me, a platform, even just sending out an email to all of the people signed up for their organizations or their party saying like, hey, this guy's running, give him a shout out, give him a wave, follow him on social media, throw him a couple of bucks. It would help us. It would help us get the message out there and become these candidates that they want us to be. But this kind of goes back to one of what I think is a flaw in the capitalist system of profit is if you have an organization that is fighting for a cause and then you actually solve the problem of that cause, it negates the necessity of your organization to continue to exist. And so if you are an executive of one of these organizations earning $150,000 a year or something, and you solve the problem, you are out of a job. You don't have your health care, you don't have social security, social safety net. And so this is something that I've actually had a challenge with in my own career in science, is that in the medical field, we don't focus on prevention or curing, we focus on treatment, because treatment is basically like a subscription to your health. And that has always been the model, is that you need something to continuously bring in revenue. Whereas if we did have a system where we had Medicare for all, where we had ultimately an economic bill of rights like FDR proposed back in 1944, we would have those security nets that would give people more freedom to do the things that they want to do and to solve problems, because it would be a system where we are focused on problem solving, not profit solving. So Rosa, so a couple weeks or maybe months ago, there was an event in Stratford for signing up for the healthcare industry or the healthcare markets. And so I went and I asked her, she came up to me and she shook my hand. She's like, oh, how are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm actually challenging you for the Democratic nomination. I accosted her back in July. She had no recollection of who I was. And, she patted my arm, and I almost felt like she was treating me like I was one of her grandchildren or something. I'm like, well, this is, awesome. And she was like, no, that's good. I'm so happy for you. I'm like, I'm not your child. I'm not your grandchild. I am running against you to bring out the fact that although you may have championed progressive policies in the past, you may have been a trailblazer for people in the past, your current actions make me question if you are still that same person who you might have been, 35 years ago? I mean, I don't remember a lot about her when she started because I was a 3-year-old boy when she first got into office. And, I moved into the district in 2010. So I started probably getting into politics around 2001 because of Star Wars and the Bush Gore election. And so when I became a Democrat, I probably knew a little bit about her because she was a prominent state figure. And, I did hear, that she was a champion for this and that. But when you start looking at her recent track record, it really started making me question, what does she actually stand for? Who is she actually fighting for? Because she doesn't support Medicare for all. Our campaign does. That is one of our biggest issues, is that we need a universal healthcare system and we need to get rid of the private health insurance industry because it is just a gangster middleman that is designed to extract profit out of people who are ill. Another big thing that we found was the IDEA program, the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, which is a federal program that is supposed to guarantee a 40% reimbursement to cities and municipalities for special education expenditures. The federal government has only subsidized about a 10 to 13% reimbursement rate. And that is an issue with the appropriations process, for which she is on the appropriations committee. And right now there's a bill in Congress called the Fully Fund IDEA Act. And out of the 5 delegates in our congressional delegation, Rosa DeLauro is the only one that has not signed on to that bill, who has not co-sponsored that bill. And the 3rd District of Connecticut lost $51 million last year because that program is not fully funded. And so when I see teachers and parents and students struggling and concerned because they're going to schools that are moldy, schools that don't have updated textbooks and equipment, and that don't have HVAC systems that can keep them warm in the winter and cool in the summer, it makes me question, what are you doing, Rosa? That is $51 million that our schools are not getting. Her continuous support for sending money to Israel is another $53 million that our district loses each year. That's $100 million that our district is not getting because of her failure to actually stand up against some of these corporate interests. And I was saying earlier, she won't abolish ICE. Well, she takes money from corporations that have contracts with ICE that profit from ICE. She voted in favor of a $960 billion Imperial War budget. She takes money from some of the largest private military contractors in the country: Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, L3 Harris, General Dynamics. And so at the end of the day, a lot of the congressional candidates are experiencing this. They don't want to give us attention because one of the biggest issues of people getting onto the ballot or winning in the primary is just people not realizing that there are other options. Because, at least in Connecticut, we've never had, in the history of Connecticut elections, we've never had a primary challenge in congressional races. It has always been someone who's been ordained. And so up until 2003, the only way to make it onto the ballot was through the Democratic Town Committee conventions. In 2003, the Supreme Court ruled that you had to have some sort of petition option for voters as a violation of free speech. But then Connecticut made it incredibly challenging to even go and use that petition process. And so the entire system has been constructed in a way to protect the incumbents who are now, they're entrenched and they're beholden to corporate interests, and they don't want to let people know that there are other options, because the sooner people know, the sooner they can act, they can mobilize, they can, get out, help get those signatures, help organize people and mobilize them for the primary. And so the only time that she will probably acknowledge us is if there is polling to show that there is a potential for us to unseat her. What about military funding or our spending for that is much more than the next 10 countries combined for the Pentagon? Who are that retired? Oh, so the United States is one of the most strategically located. We have the most strategic position on the globe. We have allies to our north and our south. We have the two largest oceans to our east and our west. To actually defend the homeland does not require trillion-dollar war budgets. These war budgets are for imperialism. These war budgets are so that we can send our brave men and women overseas to Iran to serve Israel's interests. It is so that we can send warships to Venezuela to abduct foreign leaders, so that we can blockade island nations such as Cuba. We don't need that money. We need that money. We need that money in our districts. We don't need to be sending that money overseas. And so, in Connecticut, we do have a lot of defense contractors. And so people are like, well, if we get rid of the defense industry, how are we going to make our money? And to me, it's like, at some point, we do have to make a choice as a society. Do we want economies that are perpetuated by war and death and destruction? Or do we want an economy based off of growing our society and building our society up? And so, we're America. We can do anything. We got to the moon. Other countries were shooting for the sky. We reached for the moon and we made it. And so a lot of these people that work in these defense industries, they are highly skilled labor. Why can't we have a jobs program that can retrain these already skilled workers? And instead of building parts for helicopters and aircraft carriers and F-35s, let's build high-speed rail. Let's build, buildings that are made in such a way that use the natural cycle of Earth to reduce the, energy costs of those buildings. Building scaled up, integrated public transit that allows the mobilization of people, and that mobilization in itself is a huge economic boon. Just being able to move people, products, services. There's so much we can do with our economy that doesn't have to revolve around war. And so I want to reduce the imperial war budget and have a true defense budget, which again should be minimal based off of our location in the globe. And yes, that money needs to be going to retired vets. And so I don't like the term free healthcare because it's not free. It is an earned benefit. It is an earned benefit that is paid for through our tax dollars, and our tax dollars are part of our labor. And so it's not free healthcare. It is an earned benefit because it is a benefit produced by our labor. I remember on the ballot that there was a spot to name a candidate. Could people just name you on there if you don't have enough signatures on petition? So, yes, technically, come primary on August 11th, people could write in my name. I could be a write-in candidate. That is a lot more challenging. And so just when people go and they go to vote, a lot of people will go in, they'll see line A, and they'll just choose the first option. If they see a second name and they're not thrilled about, their representation now, they might circle in line B. It is a much, much more cumbersome task to get people to write in a name. And then a lot of times, if someone spells, if they put in Andrew Rice, but, the E's a little smudged, they could always say like, oh, well, you know what? That's not, we can't tell if they actually meant Andrew Rice or if they meant Andrew Rick. And they'll do stupid shit like that while simultaneously accusing the Republicans of doing the same shit. And so, unfortunately, a lot of establishment Democrats and the Republicans engage in voter disenfranchisement. The Republicans just do it on the general election level. Democrats focus it on their primary voters. Oh yeah, please feel you can email me, you can text me I don't remember so I have my personal phone number and then I have a campaign phone number. Both of them do go to this phone that I'm using right now. But I would love those photos. I really appreciate you taking pictures of them, of me, because it is always helpful having pictures to put up on the website, the newsletter. So really, thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. Single payer healthcare, absolutely. So we are the richest nation in the world. It is an embarrassment that we don't have universal health care. If every other country if our peer nations can figure it out, and not one of them in the past 70 years that they've had it ever said, like, you know what, we need to privatize because that's better. What are we doing? And so I really want to see a transformation of society, and a lot of that starts with the mentality of how we operate. And so under a capitalist system, the mentality is always, how does this generate profit? How does this make me money? How does this make me more wealthy? But a lot of people call themselves capitalists. It's just like you might think you're a capitalist, but unless you have capital, you are not a capitalist. You are a worker. And so you have billionaires, but a lot of these are just anecdotes. The system is not meant for all of us to be wealthy. It is meant for a few of us to be wealthy, who already have the means of production and already have access to the natural resources. And then you have a class of poor, homeless people, so that the people in the middle can look down and say, like, oh, I don't want to be that, so I'll accept less and less and less things for myself and worse conditions on the hope that I can break through and be the next Elon Musk. But I want to see a shift in societal thinking where we don't think about what makes us profit as an individual. It is what helps us build society for everyone. What helps us have a true a society that takes care of one another, that helps thy neighbor, that actually. So capitalism and socialism did not exist back in 2,000 years ago. But I'm going to venture a guess that the guy, Jesus, who said that we need to feed the poor and house the homeless and take care of the sick and welcome the immigrant, and that prostitutes are more representative of the children of heaven than a rich man, and threw tables at rich men and said that a camel would sooner get through the eye of a needle than a rich man would get through the gates of heaven, I'm pretty sure that guy would have vibed a lot more with socialism than capitalism. And so I want people to start thinking not what can they do for their community? Because at the end of the day, the mentality that we have been, propagandized and just driven into us is this idea of individualism. And I feel that the system has made us conflate individualism with individuality. So I love Star Wars. I love fireplaces. I love pianos and artwork. I'm a gay man. I play piano. Those are things that make me an individual in the sense of individuality. Individualism is the sense of picking yourself up by your bootstraps, and that every man is an island and that you have to do everything by yourself. And to me, that is another way of generating profit. And so the example that I use is the lawnmower. Say you have a neighborhood of 7 people. You're all not mowing your lawn the same day, same time. What if you all had one lawnmower, and on each day of the week you all chose a day to do your lawn and you shared one lawnmower? Well, that's not as profitable for Home Depot as if all 7 of you had 7 lawnmowers. So instead of building on the idea of community and helping one another, we're all told that we have to be individuals and individualism and that ruggedness. And to me, that is just a way of generating profit, and it was never meant as a long-term way of building up society. The negative impact in crime rate and public trust. Any thoughts? So I understand that people want to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and so we do need some sort of public safety network. don't think that the police are doing the best job that they could be. I appreciate, people who are willing to sign up to do these things. I won't want to do it, but at the end of the day, I don't think the punitive model is doing anything to really help society. I think we need to be focusing more on, well, first of all, crime prevention. Police don't prevent crime. They respond to crime. What does prevent crime is having your basic needs met. And this is why we need something like the Economic Bill of Rights that FDR proposed, where, we have universal health care, a right to a job, a right to housing, a right to food, water. It's the 21st century, so I would like to see a broadband internet added into that. But, sorry, my lights are going crazy. Millennial with their lights. And so we can prevent crime by just ensuring that people have the resources that they need to survive. Also, that is just petty crime. We have criminals, we have PDFs running the government. We have people that are, insider trading. We have plenty of immoral and illegal actions that are being conducted by people with wealth. And so a lot of times the criminal justice system is not there to punish crime. It is there to punish poor people. And so I want to shift to a model where we prevent crime by having these programs that ensure basic needs are met. And for any sort of criminal activity, a lot of times it boils down to mental health. And so I would like to see a system where instead of having a police officer respond to crime, you have someone who is trained with de-escalation and mental health and has a better understanding of the dynamic of the human psyche that calls the shots. They come, they intervene, and they have a police escort who is trained to, handle any sort of violence or any sort of altercation. But in order for them to be allowed to use it, the mental health care professional and they're the ones that have to say, like, okay, I have determined that this situation is violent and unsafe. I now give you permission to do your police thing. But still, there needs to be a lot more. So I don't think we should have qualified immunity anymore. I think that system has been abused. Hopefully, if we do have a system in place where a mental health professional can, look at the situation, make a professional determination on how to intervene and de-escalate, that we would see a reduction in the amount of police deaths. Because I think the police departments have killed on average around 1,100 people a year. But I think this goes back a lot to the capitalist system of policing that is designed more to protect capital interests than it is to protect communities. Because at the end of the day, the police are usually there to protect are there to protect more corporate interests than they are to protect community interests. And I'm not trying to say that as a way of bashing police officers. I know a lot of police officers who go into policing for the right and good of intentions. And so it's not necessarily a them problem, it's a systematic problem. And so a lot of it has to do with addressing the systemic issues that we are facing, because a lot of times when individuals have to operate within a system that is broken at its core, they could have the best intentions and not be able to have the right outcome because the system doesn't allow for it. "84% of sheriffs in Michigan support an alternative program for mental health like the Cahoots program in Oregon that takes 15% of 9/11 calls." I'm going to have to read more about this Cahoots program, because that is one of the beautiful things about having a country like America, is that you have states that can experiment with different programs, and we can see how they work. And each state is like a little mini scientific project. And we can evaluate the success of different states and how different states implement some of these policies, and then help create that on a federal level. Because at the end of the day, the federal government, by the nature of what it is, has more resources that can help more people than individual states can. And so thank you for sharing that with me, because I would like to look into that more. And I just realized the time. It is 9:45. So two things that are hard for the campaign. First thing, fundraising. Second thing, time management and boundaries, because I'm the type of person that if I'm vibing with where I'm at, if I'm vibing with the conversation or the people that I'm with, it can be a challenge for me to separate away from that. And my advisors have actually said that one of the people that I need to hire is literally just a chaperone who can say, oh, Andrew, it's 9:30. That's all the time you get for this. Move on to the next thing. So it is 9:45. And so for the reality of running for office and running a campaign, time management is important. And so I need to, show for myself and for voters and constituencies that I can set time boundaries that allow me to conduct a campaign and governance in a way that isn't interfered by my personal vibing. So it is 9:45. Does anyone have any last minute questions? Otherwise, we're going to wrap up. So I'll just give a couple more seconds for anyone to ask a question if they have it. I should get that Jeopardy music. I'm not gonna do the rest of that because I don't like that. Hey. Hey. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for joining tonight. This is something new we just started a couple weeks ago. I think this is our third round. If anyone knows, so one thing that we do want... Hey, Fabian. Guten Nacht. Es ist Nacht jetzt. German speaker. I speak a little bit of German, so I always get excited when a German speaker can tell me if I'm doing good or not with my German. So again, thank you all for joining tonight. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation, the questions. If you have any other questions, you can always email us. I do try and check email as often as possible. I can't always get to questions quickly because as a grassroots campaign, we do have limited resources. And so a lot of times I will have to focus on things that, because, one thing that an advisor says is every hour you use, you have to think, how does this advance the campaign? So if you have a question, I don't get to it quickly, I do apologize. That's another reason why I do like holding these fireside chats, is to give people direct access to me on a consistent basis. So again, thank you all for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you all have a good evening. And remember, even though we're living through fascism, have some fun, because fun fights fascism. Take care, everyone. Good night.